I'm ready to go. All right, so welcome everybody. I am so excited to be here. I want to say welcome to KSU and UGA, and of course we got GSU right here in the house. And these people are ready to party. They're ready to get down. I hope the other two campuses are with us and we're ready to go. If you guys are ready to learn something, let me hear you say yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. We're going to learn something tonight. And what we're here to learn about is relationships. Here's what I want to do is let you know why I have become an expert in relationships. By the way, that's a joke. I'm not actually an expert. But why I have what I would call an authority to speak on relationships is because until about 10 years ago, I was terrible at relationships. And I was fortunate enough to have somebody who learned as much as they could about relationships and how to do them well, pour into me and help raise me up and how I did life and relationships with my friends and family. So I come from a very broken background, and my relationships were all failures up until, I would say, about 7 years ago or so. Big life changes happen. And so I'm passionate about seeing people become very healthy, very functional in their relationships, and having their relationships be a place where they flourish and they cause others to flourish. And that's why I get to be here to speak to you about relationships. Let me tell you this, I am extremely privileged to do this. It's an honor for me to come here and pour into you guys. And my hope is that this will be something of great value to you. I hope that this adds value to you and your friends. So in the young adult and late teen years, the 20s, they are such a highly relational time of our lives. They're highly relational. You're all freed up relationally. You're not tied down in relationship right now. And even the lines between friends and family, they get blurred sometimes. Thank you, pop culture, for making music about blurred lines. And mainly at this season in life, people just get to hang out together. There's not many formal commitments made in relationships in your time, in your day. What I want to do is talk about boundaries. And let me first define what a boundary is. A boundary is a relational limit. It's a relational limit. It's where you say to someone else, you can't go further than this. And if somebody tells you what their limits are, they're telling you where you should not go beyond. So here's a myth that I want to bust real quick that happens a lot among young people. Deep relationships exist when there are no boundaries, no limits. There's the myth. And if they don't say that, they practice it anyway. They live it out. But here's the truth. The truth is this: deep and healthy relational bonds only exist and grow in the context of clear and defined relational boundaries. The key to deeper, more meaningful relationships is relational boundaries. So let me give you a quick example. Property lines in a subdivision. If you went into a subdivision full of houses, imagine if there were no property boundaries, that one house had no idea where its property ended and the next one began, and everything just ran together in the neighborhood. It would be chaos. Nobody would know whose property belongs to who. Whether that tree that's causing a problem in this yard, it belongs to this house or that house. Property lines are necessary. They're required in certain areas of life. And when we don't require them in our relationships, it can become chaos in our relationships. So you can take control of your life. You can't take control of your life without developing intentional boundaries. Developing boundaries is the way to take control of your life. It's the way to do it. And a person who lacks boundaries, I'm convinced, will eventually come to ruin. You can count on it. You can count on that. A person who lacks boundaries will eventually come to ruin. So, what I want to do is help equip you with the tools to help you manage relationships. Because relationships, period, are difficult. They are hard. You can raise your hand right now if you've been in any relationship that was a difficult relationship. If you've been in multiple relationships that were difficult relationships. Relationships are hard. And it's a skill in life that you can either choose to intentionally master, or you can avoid learning what you need to learn to become masterful at them, and then watch your life come to ruin. Which is no fun for anyone, if you feel me. GSU's in the house saying, yeah, I want to know if KSU and UGA are both still feeling me on the boundaries. This is good. Not awkward at all. It's not awkward at all. We're moving right along. So, I want to go over a few property and boundary problem indicators. How do you know whether or not you are someone who struggles with or has a problem with boundaries? How do you know? So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a list, and if any of these things is true of you, this may sound harsh, but unfortunately, what's true is you have a problem with boundaries. So, number one, if you find it difficult to say no to people, you got a problem with boundaries. If saying no to people, to someone, about something that you know you should say no about, is difficult for you, you probably have an issue with boundaries. 2, if you think holding people responsible for something they did that was wrong is mean, then you probably have an issue with boundaries. Again, if you think holding somebody responsible for something that they did that wasn't good, if you think that that is mean, you probably have an issue with boundaries. If you blame others for your poor choices, you may have an issue with boundaries. If you try to rescue people from the natural consequences of their choices and behaviors, you probably have an issue with boundaries. If you hold others responsible for your feelings and your emotions, you have an issue with boundaries. If you often say the phrase, you made me feel, or you made me think, or you made me do, then you probably have an issue with boundaries. If you say yes to unhealthy people compulsively, you might have an issue with boundaries. If you have difficulty telling someone how you truly feel about them in healthy ways, you might have an issue with boundaries. If you feel guilty when you don't comply with someone else's wants, you might have an issue with boundaries. One of my favorites here, if you find yourself manipulating in order to get your way, you probably have an issue with boundaries. Here's a tough one. If you refuse to receive love, true, authentic, genuine love from someone else, you probably have an issue with boundaries. How can that make sense? So any of that resonate with anybody here? Is anybody that connect with anybody here? Anybody, yeah, I get it. I've had issues with all of those things. Every single one of those I wrote down from my own personal past. I had difficulty saying no to people. I still to this day, it comes from my people-pleasing I want to be affirmed. It's difficult to say no to people, to just tell somebody no. But let me assure you that as a father, having difficulty saying no creates all kinds of problems in my household. And what I would be developing in my 4-year-old, if I cannot say no to him, is simply wrong. And he will not be able to navigate the realities of this world if he never hears me say no. So let's talk about the invisible property lines and responsibility. So in the physical world, as we talked about earlier with subdivisions, boundaries are easy to see. Fences, signs, walls, moats, manicured lawns, hedges, they're all physical boundaries. And in their differing appearances, they give the same message. This is where my property begins. And the owner of the property is legally responsible for what happens on his or her property. And non-owners are not responsible for the property. And physical boundaries mark a visible property line that someone holds the deed to. You can go to the county courthouse and find out exactly where those boundaries of responsibility are and whom to call if you have business there. In the very place where I stand right now, this building, the deeds that were drawn up in the late 1800s, the language that was used in those deeds was very muddy. It was simply unclear where one property line ended and the other one began. And so it just so happens that here on this block, there have been some lawsuits going on between building owners about whose property is whose and who's responsible for what. And it's created a very expensive lawsuit because property lines were simply not defined clearly. These are visible, physical property lines and boundaries. We can talk a little bit about you and where you begin and where you end, and someone else and where they begin and where they end. And these things get blurred all the time. All the time. Most of the time, those lines get blurred simply because of fear. Or because you want something that's inappropriate and you need it immediately. Boundaries simply define us. Our relational limits help to define us and define others. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and where someone else begins, which leads me to a sense of ownership. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for, what I am to own and take responsibility begins and ends, then I'm free to do with it what I like. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. However, if I do not own my life, my choices and options become very limited. Why? Because most of the time, what I'm choosing to do is based on what others want for me. Does that sound familiar? Think of how confusing it would be if someone told you, guard this property diligently, because I will hold you responsible for what happens here. And then they did not tell you the boundaries of the property, or they did not give you what it means. They didn't give you the means with which to protect the property. This would mean that it's not only confusing, but also potentially dangerous, because you have no idea how to look out for their property and protect it. So if somebody steps onto the property and you begin to have a conversation with them about where this person who asked you to protect their property, where their boundary lines end, that can create an altercation that you don't know how to navigate your way out of, because you simply have no idea whether or not the property you're referring to is actually belonging to the person who asked you to protect their property. What do you do in that situation? I don't know. But this is exactly what happens to us emotionally all the time. all the time, emotionally, we don't know where we end. And somebody tries to come onto our property, so to speak, and we have no idea how to tell them, you're not allowed there. This is not a place where I'm okay with you being. So something we should all know is we are responsible to others and for ourselves. We are responsible to others and for ourselves. When it comes to properties, centuries ago when they would build castles, they would typically put a wall around the castle. And that wall served a purpose. The purpose of the wall was to keep out the bad. It was to protect the castle or the city. But those walls weren't just walls. They would have gates in the walls. And the purpose of the gate was to let the good in. Often in relationships, we have no idea how to keep the bad out and let the good in. And some of us just have a wall. And we don't know how to let the good in or push the bad out. And some of us just have a gate. There is no wall. We just let anything in. We'll let the bad in. If these things don't change in how you navigate your relationships, your city can be destroyed. And I don't think that's what anybody intends to happen. Nobody starts walking down a boundaryless path thinking to themselves, I hope that my city gets destroyed. The problem is you end up getting to a destination without thinking about it or being intentional about it because you're clueless. And I'm not saying anybody in this room is clueless. You're all in college. You're not clueless. All right. Letting the good in and the bad out. Here's the thing. If a city didn't let the good into the city, then the people in the city would starve. And since we all need love, we need to learn how to recognize real love and let real love in. And the fate of the city rests upon proper management of the gate and the wall. So in your relationships, if you don't manage the gate and the wall well, then you might just starve, and you might just not ever receive true love. So, what do you do when it comes to saying yes and no? How do you know what to say yes to and what to say no to? And I get that this might sound slightly elementary. It might sound like something that we should have learned already. But we live in a culture that has a really hard time saying yes to only the good and no to the bad. And the truth is, we're most like the people that we surround ourselves with. And if we're constantly surrounded by people, which it's hard not to be, who have issues saying yes to the good and no to the bad, then we're going to follow suit without even being aware of it. So how do you learn to be protected from the bad without being isolated with the good? Our problem is that we often do not know when to say yes and how to say no. And this is the difference truly between a child and an adult. A child has someone else to manage the wall and the gate for them. However, an adult has to figure that out for themselves. So, if you have not built up healthy relational walls and installed healthy relational gates, then let's talk about how to rebuild the relational wall and install a healthy relational gate. Saying no. Let's just talk about saying no for a minute. And this is true for more than just relationships. If you are around people who are wild and ungrounded emotionally, you're around people who lack self-control. And if you're around those people and you have difficulty saying no to them, this is a place where it would be good for you to begin building relational walls. If you're around people who have dark and unjustified thoughts, they cannot control their own thoughts, and you have problems saying no to them, it might just be good for you to build some relational walls in those relationships. And if you're around people and you spend time with people who have animalistic and carnal appetites, and you have issues saying no to them, it would probably be good for you to learn how to build healthy relational walls in those relationships. You talk about saying no to destructive and negative circumstances, people who are always complaining. You can say no when those people get into that line of thinking and speaking. I mean, the truth is, you cannot take control of your life without learning how to say no to these things. Without being wild and ungrounded emotionally, without having dark and unjustified thoughts, without having animalistic and carnal appetites, without having destructive and negative circumstances. You cannot take control of your life without learning how to say no to these things. And until you learn to do this, you will be swept down the current of your emotions, your thoughts, your appetites, and your circumstances. And your life will be totally out of control. You can simply learn how to say no to those things and help others say no to those things. And you can say no to people who can't say no to those things. And it will help you take control of your life. Most often, people without the ability to say no feel like a helpless victim. But they are not victims. They are volunteers. They're volunteering for it. They feel like a helpless victim when they have trouble saying no. But the truth is, they volunteered for the ruin that they're currently experiencing. So listen, you must have a filter. Let in only the good things and say no to the rest. You simply give it a wall. Some of us just have a sieve. That's all we have. We don't have an actual wall that keeps things out. And walls are not bad. Some people talk in a way where they say, inhibitions are bad. No, inhibitions, some of them are very good. They can be very good. They help protect you from making terrible choices. Not all inhibitions are good, but most of them are actually good. They've just gotten a bad rap. And what you hear people talk about constantly is, oh man, hey, why don't you just have another drink and release your inhibitions? You know, be yourself, have fun, go wild. And I don't know how often that actually leads people down a good, healthy path to a flourishing destination. So there's so much here. I'm trying to make sure I manage the time here as best I can. I want to talk a bit about loads and burdens when it comes to relationships. Turn to your neighbor and say loads and burdens. That's right, loads and burdens. It's interesting. Stay with me. Because one of the primary skills of life is mastering relationships. And here's why. Relationships possess the capacity to be the source of our greatest joys and our greatest pain while on earth. And the invitation is for you to walk in wiser ways than you have before in the way that you relate to people. And so we're talking about how to say yes, how to say no, what belongs to you, what doesn't belong to you. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what you're responsible for and what others are responsible for. Again, a boundary is a relational limit. And what we're trying to make are bonds, which are our relational connection, like a link between two people. When you're trying to form bonds with no boundaries, things get out of control. So, I want to help bring clarity to something that can be so confusing. Here's the questions. When and how often should you help someone in need? What help should you expect from your friends? What should your friends expect from you? What is the right response to a needy person? What is my responsibility in relationships? Next question. When I am helping somebody and when I am being used by somebody, how to know when you are actually helping somebody and when you're being used by somebody. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make an assumption about all of you. At all three campuses here, I'm going to make an assumption about you. My assumption is that you genuinely want to help other people. And you actually care about the needs of others. You want to help people and you care about the needs of others. But you struggle more with feeling guilty about not helping everyone who has a need of some kind. Because this is something that we all struggle with. We all struggle with feeling guilty about not helping somebody who we know and care about who has a need. So boundaries are not the ammunition to be indifferent toward the needs of others. Let me say that again. Boundaries are not the ammunition to be indifferent toward the needs of others. It is good to help people. But boundaries give you permission to be intentional about who we help and why. Let me help unpack how you know when it's good for you to help somebody else and when it's actually not helpful to help somebody else. I'm going to separate a load from a burden. A load is simply something, a responsibility that you have chosen for yourself. Nobody just gave it to you. You chose it. It's your responsibility. You own it. You signed up for a new class, and that's your responsibility to pay for. You just bought a car. You signed a lease on your new place. You decided to make payments on an Apple computer or a new iPhone. Those are choices that you make. That's a load that you carry. And a load is a measure of weight in proportion to your strength. If you stop for a second and you think about your friends, I'll bet that you can think of somebody who's chosen to carry more than what they can actually handle. And if you can't think of anybody, that person is most likely you. It's most likely you. Each person has a load. Every person here has something that they are responsible for carrying by themselves. And it's not anybody else's responsibility to help you carry your load. And each person's load is unique to them. The idea is, don't make yourself responsible for more than you can carry. As far as a burden goes, the difference is that a burden happens to somebody. All of us have experienced in life when a load becomes too heavy for us to carry on our own. Or if we have a load that's heavy enough on its own and then somebody else piles more weight on top of us that we were not prepared for. Something like, I got sick, or my mom got sick, or my sister got in a terrible car wreck, or somebody got robbed. Things happen that are no fun, and they become something that we become responsible for that we didn't choose. It wasn't something that we signed up for. It happened to us. Those are burdens. It's okay to help other people with their burdens. That's okay. It's actually, I suggest it. We should be helping each other with a burden, with something that happened to us that we didn't choose, that is now a weight that we must carry. That's okay. But no one, to be clear, is always burdened. People who act like they're always burdened most likely just chose loads that were too heavy for them to carry on their own. And you might have friends like that who have simply chosen to carry too much, and now they're constantly asking you to come help them carry that load, acting like it's a burden. And the truth is, they just irresponsibly chose more than they could handle. So, here's the boundary. I am responsible for my load and other people's burdens. Simple principle. You put it into practice, it'll change the way you do relationships. I am responsible for my load and other people's burdens. So I am not responsible for your load, and you are not responsible for mine. I have chosen to carry what I'm going to carry. You have chosen to carry what you're going to carry. You're responsible for yours. I'm responsible for mine. Back to the subdivision. If my neighbor comes over to my house and says, hey, would you go mow my lawn? I'm going to tell my neighbor, no. You mow your lawn. I mow mine. I chose my lawn. You chose your lawn. You take care of yours. I'll take care of mine. Now, if my neighbor comes over and says, my wife fell off a ladder and she broke her hip and I've got to rush her to the hospital, would you mind coming over and feeding my dog in the next day or two? I'm not going to wait. I'm going to go over there and feed his dog. I'm probably also going to mow his lawn for him. Something happened to him that he didn't choose, and now the loads that he is carrying just got too heavy for him to carry on his own, which means he can't fulfill all of his responsibilities. His life was interrupted with something that caused him to carry something too heavy. And that's where we step in and we help each other carry burdens. And by the way, your load does not become a burden just because you mismanage it. I'll say that again. Your load, what you've chosen to carry, does not become a burden. It doesn't turn into one just because you mismanage it. It's still a load that you're responsible for. And I hate to say it, but as friends who have problems saying no to our friends, we often enable people to think and believe that their loads are now burdens, no matter how they became that way, by saying yes to helping them with the wrong thing. As for me, it's too easy for me to help others too much and not be open to helping myself. It's easy for me to go be Superman in other people's lives and forget about taking care of my own responsibilities because I'm too busy trying to help everybody else with theirs, because that's just what I want to do. I want to help people. However, I can't tell you how many seasons I come to a place of burnout because I've spent so much time helping other people with their loads and neglecting my own that I just crumble under the weight. Does this sound familiar? So the second thing I'll say about this, I will not carry your load for you. I will not carry your load for you, but I will help you carry your load. I will help you carry your load. I got a buddy who works for a church. He tells a great story about a lady who calls into the church, and she says, "Can you help me?" You don't know what she was dealing with, but the answer was yes. We can drive you to a number of organizations that we sponsor who are actually better equipped to help you with your circumstances. Can we take you to one of these places? And she said, no, I just want some money. Well, we're not going to give you money, was his response. But we will get you to an organization that we fund, that we give money to, that's actually equipped to help you with your immediate needs and your long-term solution. That way we can get you back on your feet. And she screams, "No, I just want money." And his response to her was this: well, the truth is we can't help you if you won't help yourself. And her response was, "It's on you. I'm taking this to the news. A church doesn't help a homeless person. God says, ask and the door will be opened. And here you are shutting the door. Helping me is what you're supposed to do with all that money you people have." So here this woman is believing the lie that because this is a church, they're supposed to give her, someone in need, money. And what my buddy was pointing out to her was, we are offering to help you. We're just not willing to give you what you want. What we are willing to do is drive you somewhere who can help you meet your immediate needs and create long-term solution. But he mentioned this. He said, listen, you don't tell us and dictate for us who we help. As a church, God tells us who we help. You don't tell us who we give money to. God tells us who we give money to. And all he did was simply say no and then set up a relational limit with this person. And she didn't like it. Another reason why we often don't tell people no, because most people don't like to be told no. And we are simply afraid of their reaction. And so we comply and we say yes, and we invite in bad situations, or we invite in carrying other people's loads for them. But what we are supposed to be doing, if we're going to develop healthy, functional relationships, rewarding, meaningful, significant relationships, is we are supposed to be able to say to one another, I won't carry your load for you. I'll help you carry it if you need my help. So what I want you guys to know is, we'll talk about TRM for a moment. TRM does not exist to help anybody carry their load for them. But TRM wants to help people carry their loads better. TRM wants to equip people to carry their own loads more effectively so that people can actually help others carry their loads more effectively. And if you've ever been around somebody who is needy all the time, asking for other people to help them carry their load, constantly complaining about how hard things have become, then you know just how draining that relationship is. If you're around people who have simply developed a pattern, a relational pattern of putting the weight of the reality of their life upon others, then you know from firsthand experience how draining that relationship is. Sometimes what you need to do is just have a difficult conversation with somebody and let them know who is responsible for what. What are you willing to help them do? What are you not willing to help them do? And sometimes that just feels formal. And formal is not always good when you're just trying to have fun. But I promise you, if you will have the courage to at times have formal conversations where you clearly define relational limits with people, it will help you experience the depth and richness in the relationships you have on a whole other level. You'll go way beyond where you ever have been before in relationships if you'll make the effort to have difficult conversations with people and just let them know, here's what I'm willing to do, here's what I'm not willing to do. And sometimes you just need people to hold you accountable, and you need to hold other people accountable. And doing that is not easy, it's quite difficult. When you hold people accountable, you say things like, I will not enable you to be weak. Rather, I will empower you to be strong. The last thing I'm going to get into that I'm sure all of you are excited about, my favorite part of the talk, it's about dating. And dating's fun. Raise your hand if you like dating and you've had fun dating. Oh, at least 2 guys in the room. At least 2 guys. All the girls say no. You know why, guys? Failing. You're failing. Just kidding. You're not. We're all failing. Nobody ever taught us how to date in the best ways. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help teach you how to date in a way that will lead you down a path toward the kind of relationship that's life-giving for life. Because let's all make sure we can agree upon this. If you're dating, the purpose of it is to get married. Okay, some of you would be honest and say that the purpose of dating is just to have some fun. Okay. But for the rest of us, dating is for the purpose of finding that someone to spend the rest of your life with, a partner, a teammate, somebody to commit yourself to for life. That's the purpose of dating. You see, back in the day, dating wasn't even like a thing. It was, hey, I met you, like they called it courting or something, and then somebody went from courting to marriage. There was not even an engagement process. It was simply like, now you're married, good job. Go have children, procreate. But in our day, we have drawn out this process of meeting somebody, getting to know them, going from oh, we're just kind of dating, to now we're exclusive boyfriend and girlfriend, and from that to, oh, we're thinking about getting engaged, oh, we've moved in together, okay, now we're finally engaged, now we go through the engagement process, now we're married. All drawn out. So if this is the context that we live in, if this is the culture that we live in, then it would do us well to learn how to date people in a way that doesn't take away the fun, but actually makes it more enjoyable while helping you maintain healthy boundaries and limits in your dating relationship, which would only help set you up for a healthy, fruitful life with somebody. So there's two paths that you can walk down in dating. I'm going to turn on this light. Two paths that you can walk down in dating. I'll put it like this. Is this working for the camera people? Okay. Want to make sure the UGA and KSU campuses don't miss out on this because it's gold. Okay. Two paths. There is the path of promiscuity. Promiscuity and the path of purity. Both paths start in a place. The path of promiscuity starts in a place of desperation. Let me describe desperation for you. Have you ever been starving? You've been in class all day. You just had all your midterms. It's coming up soon, isn't it? Midterms, right? You've been in your class all day. You're starving. You're walking down a street, and in front of you, you see signs for Taco Bell and McDonald's. And then about 4 blocks down from there, you know what's coming, and it's a Kale Me Crazy. And the deal with the Kale Me Crazy is it's good food. It's good for you. It's healthy. It's going to be a good choice if you choose to consume it. But right in front of you is that Taco Bell. It's that nasty taco that's going to turn your stomach inside out. And the deal is, you're starving. Do you wait 4 more blocks to get to a smoothie full of kale, which is probably going to give you a lot of great energy, natural vitamins and nutrients? It's going to make you feel good. Or do you simply take the thing that is right in front of you because you're desperate? You're starving. That's desperation. Desperation leads us to make choices that are typically very unhealthy for us because we're not thinking clearly. We're desperate. And desperate is not a great thing, especially in relationships, because it leads us to make very unhealthy choices, very unwise choices. Desperation. So the path of promiscuity starts in a place of desperation. The path of purity starts in recognizing that you are a dependent person. And this is not dependent as in codependent. This is dependent as in we need each other. We were built and wired for relationships. And we understand that we cannot do life on our own. So when you come to a place where you recognize that you are dependent on others in order to make it in this world, in this life, this is a healthy place. It's a sober-minded place. It's a mature place where you recognize, I'm dependent on others. In order to accomplish the things, the goals, the dreams, in order to accomplish wants, needs, I'm dependent on others. I cannot do life on my own. I am not on an island by myself. I have to be around people. I am dependent on others. Desperation typically meets someone who looks really awesome and immediately turns into what's called infatuation. Who's been infatuated before? Infatuation is, it exists in imagination land. Infatuation isn't real. When you're infatuated, you're not thinking clearly. And what you see about somebody is only the good. And the good gets amplified to amazing, as opposed to it's just good. Infatuation has extremely low standards, but talks about someone as if they're God. Infatuation puts somebody up on a pedestal who simply doesn't deserve to be there. And infatuation is simply false. When you're infatuated with somebody, you're in a place where you're constantly imagining that person in unrealistic ways, and it's making you feel good about yourself. And an infatuation is when you're thinking about somebody probably too often. You're infatuated, consumed. On the path of purity, if you've started out in a place of dependence and you meet somebody that you dig, you become interested. Being interested in somebody means that you ask questions about them. You don't imagine what that person is like. You ask, and you let them respond. And so what you know about them is based on what they say and they do. Interest helps you evaluate somebody with a sober mind. You think clearly. You don't allow your emotions to control how you behave in the relationship. It's a little different from infatuation, where infatuation causes you to behave in ways that you wouldn't normally behave in getting to know somebody. Interest would still ask questions 6 months into dating. You're dating, but you're still getting to know somebody. This is something I still practice with my wife of 7 years. Asking questions. What was your favorite thing that you did this week and why? What was something that you tried that you failed at this week? What'd you learn from it? What are you wanting to do in the next season of life? What's something that's on your heart that you'd like to accomplish? Is there anything that you want to be saving for? We ask each other questions because we're interested. The moment you stop asking somebody questions while you're dating them, you just said, I'm not interested anymore. Something I would say is that if you're dating somebody and you're not asking each other questions anymore, you should probably stop dating. I know that sounds really harsh, but if you're not acting interested, then why are you dating? Is it just to fill the void? Promiscuity moves from desperation to infatuation, and everybody in here is going to hear this and suddenly go, I know somebody like that. It moves from infatuation to isolation. Hey, what happened to Matt? Is what will happen in a group of friends. Hey, what happened to Matt? I don't know. He started dating Nancy, and then we just haven't seen him anymore. Oh, why? Well, because they isolated themselves and they went and created their own world that was happy, away from reality. What happens is that the world gets really hard with two people who are infatuated with each other, and their friends are trying to point out to them that there are red flags, And so they just go create their own little world together that's not real. But it's safe for them because they don't have to listen to anybody tell them this is not a good idea. Have you thought about slowing down a little bit? No, it feels too good. Why would I slow down? It's love. She's my soulmate. This is exactly what movies are made of. So I'm going to go isolate myself away from voices of reason and voices of wisdom in my life, and I'm going to go ahead and just live here for a little while. It'll work out, right? That seems smart. Purity, on the other side, does something different. Purity says, invitation. I am going to invite you into my world, and you are going to invite me into your world. We haven't created a common one world yet because we're just dating. But I'm going to invite you into my world, and you're going to invite me into your world. And I'm going to interact with your friends and family, and you're going to interact with my friends and family. I'm going to ask them questions about you. Hey, tell me stories about Sarah. What's she like? Because I want to know what your friends and your family have to say about you. I'm interested. And you're going to do the same thing with me. And during that phase of the relationship, I'm still evaluating. Is this good? Does this make me better? Do I make them better? And you're inviting them into your worlds, and the worlds are still separate. There's still two different worlds, two different people, two different worlds. You haven't become one. You haven't become married. And so, as promiscuity has already gotten into a place where this looks like marriage, this is still in a phase where you're evaluating for marriage. Promiscuity moves on to the next part of the path, which is consumption. And that's where all the problems step into the relationship. With consumption, two unhealthy people who have developed an unhealthy relationship with absolutely no boundaries, no ability to say no to each other, have become entirely codependent with each other, begin consuming each other, draining the life out of each other. And each person ends up feeling like the other is an emotional vampire and failing to recognize that they signed up for that. And they've actually walked down a path that allowed it to happen. And they'll deny it all day long. We're not behaving this way. We're not just consuming each other's lives. Well, why isn't he still pursuing music? I don't know. He just he gave up on it. No, the truth is, you've probably consumed that person, and now they've given up on doing other things because all they're ever worried about doing is making sure you're not fighting with them. The consumption phase of this kind of relationship creates so much friction that typically when people are in the consumption phase of a relationship, they're just fighting all the time and have no idea why. And nobody else knows why either. But they're completely dysfunctional without each other, and truly, they're dysfunctional with each other. No fun. On the path of purity, invitation moves to contribution. I've invited you into my world, and I want to see how you contribute to it. You've invited me into your world, and I'm going to do my best to contribute to it. Because when you get married, one of the things you're committing to is saying, I'm going to commit to making you the best version of you for the rest of your life. I need to know how I can contribute to your world. And I want to see how you contribute to mine. And the point of this is elevation. We're meant to be elevating one another. The point of this is just consuming one another. This doesn't elevate anybody. In fact, it just takes away. This is about giving. This is about taking. At the end of the path of purity is completion. Will you marry me and make a formal commitment to spend the rest of your life with me? The end of promiscuity is consolation. We already act married. I guess we might as well get married. That's what dreams are made of. Right, guys? We might as well get married. I mean, we're basically already married. Right? Oh, so romantic. It's not what anybody's dreaming of at all. What promiscuity does is promiscuity always puts intimacy before commitment. I want to experience more intimacy with this person before I commit more to them. And a healthy path in dating will always put more commitment before giving away more intimacy to someone else. And so let me unpack that just a little bit for you. When my wife and I started dating, we did it differently than any other relationship I've ever been in my life. And one of the things that I decided to do was get really intentional about being the leader as a man. And I would sit down with her no longer than 3 months at a time. I mean, at least every 3 months we would sit down and have a bit of a formal conversation about our boundaries. And I would set expectations with her, and she would set expectations with me. We would talk about if we still liked where this was going, if we felt that it was developing in a healthy way, if it was helping both of us become better versions of ourselves. And everybody around us had no idea why we were doing that. It made sense to nobody that we would sit down and have those kinds of conversations. And it is still to this day the healthiest, most rewarding, most functional relationship I've ever had in my life. What we were doing was building trust into the foundation of our relationship. What we said with those conversations were, I respect you so much that I am willing to sit down and have these semi-awkward conversations in order that we may have a healthy relationship, that we might have healthy understanding, healthy expectations of each other. And man, it paid off huge. It was a little painful and awkward during that season, but it paid off huge. And now, I mean, I can't imagine what my life would be like without my wife. She's my best friend. And the trust that's in the foundation of our relationship has continued to this day. It's awesome. But what we did was we put more commitment before we allowed more intimacy into the relationship. And so we would have conversations where we said, are we good to go to the next level here? Are we good? Everybody wants to experience intimacy in relationships. We are wired for it. That's the good stuff. We want intimacy. And I'm not just talking about physical intimacy. Intimacy can just be knowing someone more than other people know them, and being known by someone more than other people know them. Sometimes it's just a very special knowledge of someone. And intimacy is meant to be very special between two people. And so often intimacy gets ruined because we give it away cheaply. We don't ask other people to earn it. We just go, here, have it. Here, have this knowledge of me. Or if you take it physical, here, just have this piece of me. I'm not going to make you earn it. I'm going to give it away cheaply. That's what happens on the path of promiscuity. On the path of purity, you make somebody earn what it is they want. If you want intimacy with me, you've got to earn it. And you've got to earn it through trust and respect and character, integrity. You've got to earn it by putting in the time. I need to hear encouraging words from you. I need to see that you are a person who grows and changes for the better without being forced. I need to see that you're a healthy person. And then I'll let you know more about me, get intimate. So the pattern of this world is to constantly put more intimacy before more commitment. And what I'm challenging you to do today, if you're dating or pursuing dating, is to put more commitment in place before you share more intimacy. I'll give you the best illustration I have. When you grab a bottle of water from somewhere, what do you want? Do you want the bottle or do you want the water? You want the water. The bottle is simply something to consume the water through. Because without the bottle, the water is just messy. It just kind of goes everywhere. You can't really get it very well. But the bottle makes it possible to consume the water. And the bottle is a container for what you want. When it comes to intimacy, commitment is the container for it. And if you don't have a container for intimacy, it just gets messy. It just gets messy. Emotional intimacy alone will get messy without more commitment in place to contain it. But that requires difficult, mature conversations between two consenting adults who say, I'm going to choose commitment before I choose more intimacy to protect myself from being a part of a dysfunctional mess. And all that's going to do is free you and that person up to continue going after the things that are good for you, as opposed to pulling you away from them, preventing you from going after what's good in this world. And then you won't have to run around questioning whether or not this is good or bad. You can know. The other thing about walking down the path of purity versus the path of promiscuity is the path of promiscuity creates these crazy, unhealthy bonds between two people. And when a bond gets broken, it's painful. And so when you start out walking in a dating relationship this way, the bonds that get created right from the start, if they are broken, that person is overwhelmed with pain, emotional pain. Now something is missing. That something wasn't even supposed to be there to begin with. When you walk down this path, little by little, adding more commitment to it, you're able to clearly, soberly evaluate whether or not this is the right or wrong person to be with. And then if it's over, no matter where you stop it, the bonds are not so strong that it creates a lot of pain. So what you're doing on this path is protecting yourself and the other person from experiencing more pain than is necessary just because you decided to date. And again, let me remind you, this doesn't take the fun out of it. This puts some guardrails up. And in like bowling, if you're not that great at bowling, the guardrails are really helpful if you want to hit a strike and not gutter ball. So there is all that I have to offer you on relationships and how to be healthier in them, more functional in them, how to be someone who can set an example for others about how to navigate relationships. And if you're going to choose to do this thing called dating, I hope that was helpful for you. I know it was for me. I'll make myself available for anybody who has any questions about that. Because I've walked through this and it has helped me hit a home run in my relationship with my wife. Anybody has any questions about it? I'm here. So that concludes our teaching for the evening. I don't know what else to say, guys.